Worship leaders, stop introducing so many new songs to your church. We don't need a new song every single month. At least that's what I think. I'm going to share why that's the case and why you should stop introducing so many new songs in your worship ministry. Coming up. Hey, Spencer here from Leading Worship Well. This is the place where we talk about how to lead yourself well, lead your church well, and lead worship well. So if you're interested in that, click subscribe down below and let's get into it, because today we're talking about how often to introduce new worship songs. And I feel like we just introduce new worship songs all the time because we think that the people in our church are so tired of the songs that we sing, because we're tired of the songs that we sing. But the fact is that the people in your church probably aren't as tired of the songs that you're singing as you think they are. And I'm going to share with you why that is today. But before we get into that, I want to hear from you, just straight up front. How often do you introduce a new worship song in your church? Are you like an every single week there's a new worship song? Are you like every month? At the beginning of the month, you introduce a new worship song. Whatever it is, let me know in the comments below, and I'll talk to you in a second. Thanks so much for leaving your answer down below. Let's get into why we need to stop introducing so many new worship songs all the time. The first reason is this. It's because the average person in your church only attends church one Sunday out of the month. Only one Sunday out of the month, and I think it's actually even less than that now since the last study that came out. But the people in your church, the average person, only shows up to church 1 week out of the month, which means if you're like, I'm going to introduce a new song this month and I'm going to do it 3 weeks on, 1 week off, and then it'll come into my normal worship rotation of songs, there's a chance that that person, the 1 week that you take off from playing that song, that might be the week that the average person in your church shows up, so they wouldn't have even heard the song in the first place. So by the time you've done the song 3 times, a person in your church might have not even heard it at all. And then you just implement it into your regular worship song repertoire, and maybe you do it like a couple times again next month, and maybe that just lines up with the Sunday that they actually come to church, and so they hear it for the first time, but you are like acting like, okay, we've done this song 6 times now, so everybody in my church knows it, but the average person in your church has only heard it 1 time. So do you see the ratio that we have in our heads that causes us to introduce so many new songs? Like for every 6 times you play a song, the person in your church has only heard it once. And not only that, but on top of that, you as a worship leader or worship team member, not only have you played the song on Sunday 6 times, but you've also got the initial text from your worship team leader, or you sent the initial text out to your worship team that, hey team, we're going to do this new song in a couple weeks. I want you to start listening to it. So now we're like a month out in advance of actually playing the song once at our church, and you've already started to listen to it like 4 or 5 times, and you learn your guitar part or your keyboard part or whatever. And then you show up for worship rehearsal and you run through the song, and then you run through it again, and then you run through it again until your band finally feels comfortable playing it, and then you show up on Sunday morning, you do another run through, and by the time you've introduced a new song for the first time for your church, you've already heard the song like 12 times and played it like a bunch of times as well. But like I said at the beginning, the average person in your church only comes to church 1 Sunday out of the month. 1 Sunday out of the month. So by the time you've heard it 12 times, if they happen to show up that 1 Sunday where you finally introduce it for the first time, that's the first time they're hearing it. But the chances are they're not even there on that Sunday. So by the time you've heard the song 25 times, that might be the first time that the majority of your church has heard the song. So do you see this ratio? And that's why we need to stop introducing so many new worship songs, because the people in your church do not hear the song as often as you do. Let's move on to point number 2. Number 2, your worship team doesn't have time to learn that many new songs well. Depending on the caliber of your worship team, it can be difficult for your worship team to learn a new worship song every single month, and they might be able to get through it, but to actually like play it the way that you know it needs to be played, that's part of it from a musical side of it. They have to play it over and over and over again. And if you're introducing a new song every single month, then your church or your worship team doesn't have an opportunity to learn that song as well as they probably need to. And what that does, more so than just maybe they aren't as comfortable playing it musically. I talk about this all the time. We are all worship leaders on stage, whether you're the bass player or the drummer or whatever, you are a worship leader. And so in order to be a worship leader, it's really helpful to feel comfortable with the musical side of leading worship. So all of that logistics of playing your guitar part and singing the right words and singing the right harmony, all of that should fall into the background so that you can actually lead your people in worship. And that's not just true for you as the worship leader, official worship leader. We are all worship leaders. So give that opportunity to your team. And I'm not going to tell you how often you can introduce a new song to your worship team, because ultimately you know the caliber of your worship team or the comfortability of learning a new song for your worship team. But honestly, think about that. Think, is my team, where we're at right now, capable of learning a new song well enough to not just play it musically, but to actually use it to lead worship? How often can you introduce a new song? What do you think? Think about your team right now. Think about that guy who works 60 hours a week and he's like barely making it to worship rehearsals, and you're like, hey Joe, we're gonna do a new song every single week. Like, they don't have time to learn that, and then you're mad at them that they don't know their guitar parts, right? So no, just back it off. First of all, like I said at the beginning, your church has only heard the song once for every 6 times you've done it, but your worship team needs time to learn the song. So be honest with yourself. It's not a bad thing if it takes your team 6 weeks to actually learn a song. That's just where you're at right now. And be mindful of that whenever you're introducing new songs. Finally, number 3, the reason that you shouldn't introduce so many new worship songs is that you need to realize that your church is not tired of singing the same songs over and over again. The people in your church are not like, oh, I can't believe that he's singing How Great Is Our God. Isn't that song from the early 2000s or whenever? I don't even know when that song came out. I assume the early 2000s. I think this is a point of pride for a lot of worship leaders, including myself. I'm always like, man, this new Maverick City music song came out and it's amazing and it's new. And then you go and lead it on Sunday morning and you realize that nobody in your church even knows who Maverick City music is. They know who Chris Tomlin is, and they want to sing, how great is our God, sing with me, right? They aren't tired of singing those songs. It doesn't mean that we need to just focus on only those songs. There's room to sing new songs. But if you've been doing a song in your church and you feel like you've been doing it for a while, maybe not necessarily like every single Sunday, but it's been in your repertoire for 5 years, those can be foundational songs for your church. And I always notice in my church, whenever I pick one of those songs that I don't necessarily like because it's not new and it's not fresh, and I've played Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord by Paul Baloche 50 billion times at this point in my life, and I'm kind of done with it, it connects with people because they're like, oh my gosh, I actually know this song. I can actually sing along because this is a song that I know. It's not just some song from like track number 9 on the new Maverick City album, right? We can pick songs that we don't necessarily choose for our own personal worship because we're tired of them. We can use those in corporate settings because your church is not tired of singing the same song over and over and over again. In fact, they crave that. They want to sing songs that they actually know. So there it was. Stop introducing new worship songs so often in your worship ministry. If you agree with me, let me know down below. If you don't agree with me, let me know down below. We'll start a discussion down there in the comments. I read every comment. I don't always respond to every single one of them, but I read every comment. Hey, if you want to improve your worship leading beyond just song selection, I've got a free audio training for you. It's called 5 Tips to Instantly Improve Your Worship Leading. In the audio training, I walk you through 5 simple tips that will instantly improve your worship leading. You just have to be aware of them. You have to know about them and then make the conscious effort to do them, but they aren't hard to do. So check that out down in the description below. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.